You're listening to the film review programme, of course, normally Mayo and Kermode, but no, not today. It's James King and Al Murray sitting in the flagship. We've taken command of the flagship. We're not some light cruiser this afternoon. We're actually, no, this is a full-blown aircraft carrier with big movies flying off it.
And a big guest.
And a big guest.
I'm a Somali pirate.
That's Armando Iannucci, ladies and gentlemen. Our big guest today, producer and co-writer of Alan Partridge, Alpha Papa. If you go to the Five Live website, you can watch us as well. You aware of this, Armando?
Yes, all right, yes. This is a trick that you've pinched off Mid Morning Matters.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Alan's internet show.
Yeah.
We pretty much base our broadcasting on Mid Morning Matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As Alan maintains, it's on the internet and therefore has a potential audience of 6 billion. An actual audience of 120. But
now, the film that had its premiere this week in Norwich, of course.
Yes, after a social media campaign, or a massive social media
Norwich?
Campaign. Yeah, from people, 1,000 people signed a Facebook petition.
Really?
Yes, and that was enough to convince a PR company that there was some useful mileage to be had out of conceding to their demands that the world premiere of Alan Partridge Alpha Papa should happen in Anglia Square in Norwich.
And did those 1,000 people show up? Because you'd hope so.
I think at least 1,000.
Oh, well,
I think
that's
it might have gone up to 1,100.
Wow.
Which for a Wednesday lunchtime in Norwich is a stampede.
That's a lot of people.
Yes.
Now, this movie's been a long time coming, surely. Because Alan's been with us a very long time.
He's been with us 21 years now. Can you believe it? You just look shocked.
Yeah, well, no, it must be that long.
Yeah, 21 years he's been around. And I think we've kind of gotten away with it because we haven't flogged him to death. We haven't done an Alan thing every year. The actual body of Alan's work, if you can consider him as
his oeuvre,
as an auteur, is about 4 series. You know, there's one series of Knowing Me, Knowing You, there's Day-to-Day Knowing Me, Knowing You, the radio stuff, and then a couple of series of I'm Alan Partridge, and then there's the Wilderness Years, and then he ends up on Mid Morning Matters. So it's not a lot of stuff, but it's been stretched over 21 years.
Because I mean, we'll talk about the film in more detail in a minute. A few years ago, you spoke about how people from the alternative side of comedy, if you want to call it that, or from the more niche end, needed to try and address the mainstream with their comedy. I remember was it a Reith lecture?
I know. It was my. I did this series of lectures in Oxford.
That's right. Yes. And you spoke about that idea. And I watching this movie and thinking about it, is one way of doing that, of course, is to have a character last 21 years. And what happens is eventually the penny drops, people catch up.
Yes.
It becomes part of the national furniture.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to writers just starting off. I wouldn't say to them, honestly, if you stick with it, within 21 years, you will strike it lucky. But we've never had a plan for Alan. He emerged, he was just, when I was doing this radio show on the air, it was a spoof radio show, and I needed a sports commentator. And I said to Steve Coogan, can you come up with a voice? And he came up with this, it was a bit more John Watson-like at the time. But instantly, we thought there's more flesh and bones to this than we imagined. And almost within seconds, somebody said, he's an Alan. And somebody else said, he's a Partridge too. You know, we knew this was more than just a 2-dimensional radio character reading out gags. There was more to him than that. We didn't expect him to last this long.
Well, amazingly, we have found a clip of because the BBC's like that, you know, they actually save the stuff.
They save it.
They do now.
Oh,
they do these days. They don't just put sellotape over where they knock the tabs out of the videotape. And we have on the hour, Alan.
This is Sports Desk. I'm Alan Partridge. And transfer news. Arsenal have bought a special Letraset action transfer pack, which includes an alien landscape and a set of 15 transfer figures of spacemen and monsters. It's great, says manager George Graham. It gives us the chance to create our own alien world with men and monsters depicted in battle or at rest as we imagine it. Title contenders Liverpool manager Graham Souness says he's not worried by this development, arguing that his multi-million-pound signings of Dean Saunders, Mark Wright and the real Ghostbusters fridge magnet should put them in contention at the end of the season.
On the hour, Rich Pickings at the Media Events Interface.
And you join us tonight. The time, the weather, the sport, the finance, the dance.
Now, does Alan Partridge, does he does he exist for you now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we write him, we can only write Alan's words by being Alan. So we all...
So it's a room full of Alans.
It's a room full of Alans, which is some weird being John Malkovich nightmare. Obviously, Steve is the best at being Alan, which is why we continually cast him. But we're all
the minute
being
he
Alan.
fails to deliver as Alan.
Yeah. Well, Clooney's in the wings, But you find us all going, yes, yes, exactly, yes. There's that. And you do feel... But the thing about him, when Steve is Alan, is he can improvise as Alan for hours. And you do feel by the end of the day, you've been in a room with Alan Partridge, which is a nightmare because you just want him to shut up. It really does does your head in.
Right.
This guy who will not stop
not stop talking.
No. And that's his great, his only gift as a broadcaster is that he can fill dead air. What with, I've no idea, but it fills dead air. And so you do have this voice. So you go home with it kind of ringing in your ears, like a sort of a Partridgian tinnitus.
Partridgian.
Partridgitis.
Partridgitis.
Yes.
So when did this movie start to coalesce? When did you actually start work on it?
About 3 years ago.
Right.
There'd been talk for some time, and various people in the UK and in America had always suggested the idea of a movie, and we never really given it much consideration until about 3 years ago when we started thinking about some ideas, and it felt right. And what we didn't want to do was rush into something. We didn't want to do Alan Goes to America. We didn't want to go Alan Goes to Ibiza or all those...
On the buses on holiday.
Holiday on the buses, yes. Up there with Rashomon as one of the my top 10.
Oh, you've come on the film programme.
Oh, yes.
Referencing On the Buses.
I've seen a film or two, The King and I.
But there's a long list of knots in that. So...
Yes.
So it's a process of animation, and then you just sorry, and then you and then so what? So I mean, I've seen the film. James has seen the film. Tell us what's in the film and how you arrived at those things. Just decisions for Alan.
Okay, what happens is Alan is, we've left him in Mid Morning Matters presenting his show, Mid Morning Matters, for North Norfolk Digital. In the film, North Norfolk Digital is taken over by a more powerful media group called Gordale Media, who are rebranding the station as Shape. So Alan has to say Shape every minute. And they're laying off a couple of the old presenters. Alan reckons it's him and another presenter called Pat Farrell. Pat is laid off, but refuses to go. And in the changeover, brings in a shotgun and insists that he carries on broadcasting. So we're now in a siege situation, and Alan's in the middle of it. And Pat knows Alan really well and feels he's the only guy he can communicate with. So Alan, without realizing it, becomes the centerpiece for this negotiation in a hostage situation. So for someone who long ago gave up the dream of being on the national landscape again and having TV and high profile, and perhaps actually reaching out to literally 6 billion people on the internet, now he's at the center of a breaking news story. So then the dilemma for him is, does he capitalize on this, or does he actually try and make sure there's minimal loss of life or concern?
We have a clip of the movie right now.
A little bit awkward. Who's in charge?
Make no mistake, this lady is in charge. So here's the situation. Pat is refusing to speak to us directly. He's willing to give us 3 hostages, but only if he can talk to us through you.
Now we need to know why Pat has done this, so we can draw things to a peaceful conclusion.
Yeah, sure. I'll talk to him. Deal. Sorry, wrong person. Yeah, come here.
Okay. Now, are you on any medication?
Just some cream. I've got very aggressive athlete's foot, but that's the only thing about me that is.
And do you suffer from any nervous conditions such as panic attacks?
Do I look like I suffer from panic attacks? I've had one panic attack in a car wash. It was a perfect storm of no sleep, no wife, and angry brushes whirring towards me. By the time the giant hairdryer came on, I was in the footwell.
Does the idea of weaponry trouble you?
No, I've fired several rifles. I've fanfares and won prizes, but I've never fired one in anger or at a cat.
And weaponry does come into it.
Yes, yeah. Weaponry does come into it. Sorry.
You won't believe how much we were laughing earlier just about the word footwell.
Footwell. Yes, that's a very Alan word, isn't it?
Well, that's a word a man who reads Auto Trader and car reviews would.
Yes, that's not me. That's Steve.
Right.
Yeah.
So when
I know nothing about cars.
Would you be able to break down the script of this film into that's Steve and that's me?
Little bits. No, actually, it goes through such a convoluted process, and we always are all chipping in. We're all filling in each other's sentences that no one can ever quite remember who came up with what, actually, which is very good if in future there are any legal disputes or contractual negotiations to be had. There's no actual physical record of who said what.
We're talking to Armando Iannucci for, I think, what's the mastermind of Alan Partridge? That's what I'm going to call you, or the brains behind Alan Partridge. I don't know if that's a compliment. Now, via the Facebook, the medium of Facebook.
I've heard of that.
You've heard of that? Well,
yes.
it's very powerful. If
yes.
1,000.
Yeah, we have our Facebook in our house, so I know very well what that organ constitutes.
William George Horrocks on Facebook.
I don't believe that.
No, Horrocks, but spelled AX, which is just fantastic.
What?
Horrocks.
W.G. Horrocks.
That's a magic spell, isn't it?
Surely it is. It's some
So
kind of
J.K.
hex that's
Rowling
been cast upon us. I've been struggling to get my asks. That's what you have to say. Asks. I've been struggling to get my Canadian fiancée to understand the concept of Alan Partridge. What can I say to convince her other non-Partridgeites to come with me to see Alpha Papa?
You will see a funny little man in a big world trying to fill it with his with his personality and talent. And as a Canadian, that should resonate very strongly.
Does he have a following in America and in Canada?
In the sort of comedy community in America, it's interesting. All the Will Ferrell and they all talk about Alan Partridge. Not constantly. They're into other things as well. But there is and actually, I was talking earlier about the interest from America in the film, and it came from them really. It came from the kind of comedy community in America. Beyond that, I've no idea. And we purposely didn't set out to make a film that we thought would translate to America or whatever. So, when Alan is sacked from, or is threatened with the sack, he's threatened with the sack, not, as they would say in America, threatened with being fired. We didn't decide to change things.
Is it getting an American general release?
I think it is. Right. I mean, how general, I've no idea. It's in a strange way, over there, it's going to be like some kind of indie art house film, which I kind of like the idea of Alan being on in the middle of a season of Fellini movies.
He'd hate that, though, wouldn't he?
Well, Alan himself would, but I think there's something quite amusing by that idea. There is this sort of weird... Perhaps we should have subtitles and everything and put it in black and white.
But part of the appeal of Alan, though, is that the parochial is universal, isn't it? Is that his tiny little world and him wrestling with it.
And then I think everyone, in a way, can identify with that. In fact, the more parochial we make it, in a strange way, the more universally understandable that would be. Whereas if we tried to generalize him and just called him our broadcaster and gave him a kind of, half American Norfolk twang, then that wouldn't work because people can see through that cynicism.
Yeah, instantly.
Instantly.
Yeah. Which is one of the problems with comedy, isn't it? Is that unless it's delivered sincerely.
Funny.
Unless it's funny, obviously.
I remember and I'm not trying to be in any way sound big by saying this, but I remember talking about this very thing to Woody Allen. Where we were agreeing that with comedy it's so instant in that if people don't laugh, it hasn't worked. You can't say, well, it's beautifully shot and whatever. Whereas in drama, there isn't a noise that people make during a drama to indicate that it's going well. Well,
that's something I've always wondered is how, if you're an actor in a theatre, I'm my instincts as a comic are huckstering, laugh hungry, a laugh every blinking line, or I start to sweat and panic and freak out. How does an actor in the middle of Hamlet know if he's going well or not?
I know, I don't know, because as long as you don't hear people snoring or leaving, I don't quite know how you know. I mean, people talk about you can hear the silence but
I don't like that.
I know. But I often envy people who make these drama films. These films with drama. They're basically, there's a whole category of films that don't have jokes in them. I don't know if you've come across that.
Yeah, I've seen one or two of these.
Now, I think, when I see a scene in it where a car draws up and the camera pans up and a guy gets out and it's raining and you follow his feet going up the steps and there's music playing, and I think that's a minute that we would cut from our film because it isn't funny.
Yeah.
But they can get away with it because it's moody.
So, I mean, when you set out to make a funny, film, obviously the clearly the plot is essential.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, the moment you start talking about this, you can sound like an idiot, can't you? You don't want to make a
You
film.
certainly do.
I certainly do. Yeah. But you don't want to. Obviously, you want an hour and a half of jokes, but you don't just want an hour and a half of jokes.
Because then it sounds like a kind of like you're trying to do like a greatest hits
gag
compilation
reel.
thing,
Yeah.
and that becomes intolerable. It's got to be the character and the situation drives the comedy, and in fact, in some cases, I find in an edit or wherever, I actually take the joke out because we don't need it. Do you know what I mean? The situation is funny enough in itself that we don't need that extra safety net of a funny gag. That kind of capsizes the moment. It makes it unreal. And I think it's all about making it as interesting as possible. Therefore, is it as funny as possible at that point where you want it to be funny, or is it just dramatically interesting where you want it to be dramatically? Are you moved, or are you excited, or are you thrilled, or are you surprised, or are you amused? And it's all about that, really.
Because this is a thriller as well, isn't it? Like you said, there's the hostage situation.
There's
so
an
at
element
times,
of that, and actually you see the development of the relationship between Alan and Pat, and that's crucial, and also the relationship between Alan and his long-suffering assistant Lynn, and that drives certain aspects of the story along, and therefore it's important that you buy into it and you don't just think these are two comedy performers performing two comedy characters in a sketch.
We love the musical choices, didn't we?
Yeah.
Are you now so in tune with the world of Alan that the musical choices, the outfits, you can just get immediately, or are there still hours of debate about it?
We do think about them a long time, and some of the musical choices we debated right up to the bitter end, which was last Friday when the film was finally handed over to the distributors. It's been so close to the wire. What music we play, because it's got to feel Alan and yet somehow not turn people off.
Yeah.
And it's always a fine line. And I've noticed there've been articles about how Alan is reintroducing a whole new generation to the school of music from the mid-90s, which is an awful thought in many ways.
That's a terrible thing you've done.
And I'm
You've
really
done a
sorry about
terrible,
that.
terrible thing.
I can only blame the others for that. I wasn't present at that meeting. If I had my way, it would just be Schubert throughout.
But I suppose an inevitable question is this isn't going to be Alan's last thing, is it? I mean, is there an Alan Partridge 2?
There isn't a
Alpha
2, but
Papa
there's an
2.
Alan Partridge 7 that
Right.
we've thought about. No, I mean, there's never been a game plan. There's never been, a 5-year strategy or anything. We just do the project because we want to do it, and it makes us laugh, and we think this would be right, and it feels like the right thing to do. And then once we do it, we kind of go away. We go our separate ways for about 2 or 3 years, and then we meet up again and think, okay, what's he up to now? Steve and I have this long-running narrative in our heads that's been going on for the last 21 years of what Alan's up to. So at some point in about 2 or 3 years' time, we'll probably go, okay, what's he doing now?
What's he up to now?
Yeah.
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 God, wow.
Yeah.
That's
Even if it's sleeping, it could just be a 15-hour movie of Alan asleep.
An avant-garde movie.
Oh, yeah, very.
Installation art.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I think we both agreed that as Partridge fans, long-time Partridge fans, it is the movie that we've always wanted of Alan, isn't it?
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
I mean,
completely.
And it absolutely recaptures the spirit that we loved so much in the TV shows and in the online stuff. It's not like because it's a movie it feels really different. It's all there. The stuff that you loved originally is still there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear. And we made sure it would play. I mean, the only big thing in it is the fact that it's a siege, but we thought the siege is going to happen, let's play it for real. So we got the police in, we got siege experts in, we talked to them, we asked them what happens when these incidents happen, and that dictated how the siege itself would play out. So it was all about keeping it real, but within Alan's version of reality.
Which is near enough reality, really. If you
think so?
Caught one of those digital stations.
Yeah. I've worked for them. Do you still listen to local radio stations, or do you feel you know it well enough now?
I know occasionally long car journeys.
Yeah.
It's always a delight to switch to BBC Bedford and Bucks.
I mean,
Three counties.
having seen the film, one of the things I really loved about it was that often in comedies now we get things that are parodies or pastiches or things that rely on sort of scene checking other films or drawing very heavily on audiences having seen other stuff. Which works and is a perfectly honourable tradition of making people laugh. But what I loved about it is that didn't happen. It was about Alan being placed in a realistic enough situation, in a situation where he was forced to broadcast as well, because otherwise no one in their right minds would ever let him broadcast. So to create a situation where he has to do it. Yeah. I loved that's the thing I particularly loved about it though. That it didn't wear those clothes that comedy films have worn lately.
Again, I'm glad you picked up on them, because that was we instantly discounted those, and whenever our conversations went down that path, we thought no, let's pull it back from that. Or if something like that does happen, then let's subvert it. So it may suggest it's going to turn into one of those scenes, and then it doesn't. And that's been a long, throughout the whole process, that's been one of the kind of watchwords we've had about the style, that it must never lapse into pastiche. It must never think it is being a film.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
No, exactly. Because you've done, the with the thick of it, the mockumentary style, as it were. Yeah. And you resisted doing that with Alan.
Yes, I think you must not be aware of it being an artificial process that you're watching. It's almost like you're eavesdropping on his actual world, which for him can be disconcerting. So he must never know.
He must never know. Alan must never know. Well, it's a wonderfully funny film. I sincerely urge everyone to see it because it's so fantastic. Armando, it's been very nice to talk to you. Alpha Papa is Alan Partridge. Alpha Papa is on general release on August the 7th, and thanks for coming in and talking to us.
A pleasure.